Thanks, Lawrence. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So actually, I know not many people know what DCC do. They're I suppose, a group that operate across 3 sectors, so energy, transport and healthcare. And the group is made up of a portfolio of 70 companies across the 22 countries. And I suppose traditionally the energy, which is the biggest part of the group, would have distributed a lot of fossil fuels, oil, LPG and mobility fuels. And the strategy is quite ambitious, basically to reduce the Scope 3 emissions, which for our company equate to the same emissions as the size of Denmark, right? That's how big it is, to reduce that by 50% by 2030. And it is to introduce carbon or biofuels to replace the likes of diesel and oil, which is 90% less emissions. So big kind of drop there. So, and in parallel then trying to build out the energy management services side. So installation of solar panels, complex heat and power solutions and insulation. So I suppose, the sustainability strategy is core to what we do, and DCC has been, I suppose, reporting for the last number of years. So for CSRD, it's really, I suppose, probably going a little broader and deeper. So we have been on the journey, but there's still a significant amount more work to do. And I would say, in terms of, the good about it is that, I suppose, it provides the clarity, I think, for all companies around where they need to focus, and kind of given a methodology around what you need to disclose, but also the consistency then. So it's all apples and oranges at the moment. If you look at sustainability reports, very hard to interpret. So I think that clarity and consistency is really good. And to be honest, I really like CSRD. I don't know if I might be in the minority, but to me, it is really, I suppose, forcing companies to really look at this properly and to get that assurance over it, so that it's not kind of focusing in on what's easy to focus on and what's good to tell the story. So to me, I would say it's really good, and that clarity and consistency which will improve over time, is probably the best part about it.
Okay, right. So thanks very much, Yvonne. So that's very much, I guess, the perspective from a large PLC type of company. Joanne, in your experience, what do you think it means for the companies that Enterprise Ireland serve, which would, by their nature, will be smaller, medium-sized enterprises?
Yeah, so can you hear me? Yep. Yeah. So Enterprise Ireland has around 3,500 client companies, Irish-owned companies. The majority of those, like you said, are SMEs. So the CSRD isn't going to necessarily impact them in a legal way. It's not going to be a regulatory requirement for these smaller companies. So as the Minister pointed to, as a smaller company operating in Ireland, you can sit there and say, this has got nothing to do with me. This is outside of, what we need to concentrate on. And when you work with smaller companies, there is so much that they have to do. There's so many priorities. There's so few resources. It's just a different game, really. What we're saying to companies, and the important thing in relation to the CSRD, is certainly to have an awareness of it, because it is a piece of legislation. It's going to have this trickle-down effect. So it's not necessarily about how the CSRD impacts you as a smaller organisation. It's how it impacts the larger companies that you supply into as a smaller organisation. And that's where the materiality assessment piece becomes really important, because a smaller company has to understand where they fit in to the materiality assessment that a larger company has carried out. There's no point in, as a smaller company, going through a kind of a sustainability review process, developing a sustainability plan and concentrating on certain areas, and then realizing that the areas that you're concentrating on fall out of scope as to what your largest customer has kind of pointed to as being the most important thing in relation to their materiality assessment. So it's all about the relationship you have as a smaller company with that larger organisation. And that's that's good business. You know, staying as close to your to the company that you're supplying into is really important. And you know, you can use things like the voluntary SME standards, which are coming out of EFRAG. That's a really useful tool to help smaller companies to try and kind of grapple with the CSRD. But I keep going back to the importance of understanding what the CSRD means to your largest or your largest kind of clients, almost the companies that you supply into, and where you fit in that picture, because that will ultimately give you a competitive advantage. You know, if you make the process or if you make it as easy as possible for a potential customer to choose you, if you make your sustainability policy, your sustainability plan as much in line with that, then you're putting yourself in a pretty good position. So yeah, I suppose it's that awareness piece, but then understanding what it means to the larger companies that you supply into is very important.
Okay, so you see opportunities here then for smaller companies to, you know, both secure and win new business by having a strong presence here.
Yeah, I mean that's where the potential benefits are. There's an opportunity piece, but it goes beyond just the opportunity. You're really going to miss out on potential business. You know, you're going to lose kind of potential business if you don't engage with the CSRD, if you don't have an awareness of it, and you don't understand what it means to the larger companies that you're supplying into. So it's important, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. You have a background as a finance professional, as an accountant. You understand the whole type of skill set you need to bring from a regulatory compliance perspective. What do you see as positive from the new standard here in terms of helping companies have level of certainty around what they need to operate to?
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Well, I wouldn't claim to be an expert in this, and looking and going, should I be down there asking the questions in some cases? But from I suppose, a Compliance Institute perspective, so CEO of Compliance Institute at the moment, and firstly, that is the membership organisation for compliance professionals, and there's about 3,800 members. And we're the educators and do it the same as an accountancy body, I guess, but in a different field. Really, Lawrence, from the compliance professionals' point of view, you have two different types of members, I would say. You have those that are specialising in this area, and we have introduced a professional diploma about 2 years ago, a level 8 qualification, and we've had the first cohort of those with their designation coming through. So we have about 100, 150 members who will be specialising in this. This is what they will do. They will eat and breathe CSRD and sustainability. But for the general compliance professional population, it's just adding this layer to an awful lot of things that, as you know, are out there already. So they're all coming together, the likes of DORA, AML legislation, MICRA, all sorts of things, AI Act, the IAF regime. So they're all kind of coming in together. And it's integrating those into the current frameworks within companies, be it DCC or the major banks or whatever, and integrating that into the current compliance framework. And there's many ways of doing that. A lot of what the compliance professional is doing this already. The whole risk management system. But I would see kind of 4 areas where the professional can help in this regard, outside of just pure compliance. You know, there's the culture within the organisation. So be it yourselves in the room or the compliance professional is tasked with that now, but changing culture and sitting at board level and integrating this into the culture of the organisation. There's clearly the horizon scanning piece. It's been mentioned somewhat already. There's been FRAGs mentioned and all that sort of thing. IASA will have a role now as well. The central bank will have a role. Clearly, a minister has left, but the legislation has come through as well. So there's a whole lot of different FAQs and guidances that are out there. So your compliance professional, as part of horizon scanning, is dragging all of that together to ensure that the boards, in particular, are leading on this and implementing it. Clearly, compliance monitoring, that's what a compliance professional does anyway. It's kind of, no, it's not, but for this audience, it's kind of an internal audit function, and just monitoring that this is being done and being done properly, and clearly overlapping with a number of existing requirements that are there, which are probably okay in most companies, But the key point here, I think, is this is not just about sustainability. So the CSRD is the framework. The implementation tools are the standards, the ESRSs. I'm going to get this wrong, you correct me if I'm wrong, but European Sustainable Reporting Standards. And they are dealing with the E, S and G, the social aspect and the governance aspect as well. So it is across the board, all of this. So it's quite a lot to grapple with. There's a huge amount in there, and it is a new profession, effectively, in a new industry.
Okay, it's very interesting that you use the word culture there, and a common phrase is that in terms of companies and their strategy, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So in terms of actually mobilising change here, Yvonne, because I'm sure it takes more than just a sustainability officer or compliance officer to actually roll out change. So how do you engage the wider, DCC have 16,000 employees, so how do you engage that number of people across all those different functions to drive towards the sustainability target?
Yeah, it's not easy because, there's, as I say, 70 businesses, but actually there's new businesses been acquired all the time. Like $500 million was spent on acquiring companies last year. So you're trying to kind of, deal and engage with quite a diverse cohort. I suppose I'm with DCC just over a year, and one of the first things I looked at doing was to see how best we engaged with the leadership, because if the leadership aren't comfortable and kind of, I suppose, engaged in this, it's very, very hard to kind of go beyond that. So we had a series of 6 months of webinars just going through around sustainable supply chains, sustainable communications, decarbonisation, etc. So we just, I suppose, went through kind of actually some really good case studies of what's happening across the businesses, and then talked about, I suppose, what others were doing externally. So to really try and kind of, I suppose, get that thought leadership piece going. And we're setting up champions across the different businesses, again, to kind of understand where each of them are at, and then understand where they need focus and support. And that's just kind of the wider kind of, what you need to do day to day. In terms of the regulation, then I've set up a program within DCC at group level where we've kind of laid out a roadmap of what needs to happen. So, kind of, I suppose, been clear and I suppose proud of the journey where people have got to, and kind of how we need to build on that going forward. And, that has a very kind of comprehensive communications plan to be able to deal with, from the leaders to the people in HR who are going to be pulling the people data, to the people doing the carbon data, the compliance professionals, the people who are going to be doing the supplier stuff, which is the newest area and probably the scariest area for a lot of people. So yeah, that communications piece is really important, and we've kind of a whole plan around that.
Okay, that's really interesting, Yvonne. Thanks for that. Joanne, in a smaller company though, right, that can't afford dedicated investment, and how do smaller companies, medium-sized companies, and we have people in here in the audience that very strong background in corporate governance more generally, and they'd appreciate the importance of having committees and structures and so on. So for smaller companies or medium-sized companies, what you see they should be looking at, or what does Enterprise Ireland provide in terms of helping them bring that level of discipline?
Well, I suppose the first thing, and just follow on from what Yvonne said, that for a smaller company, the most important thing is that there is buy-in at a kind of a leadership level, that the CEO, that the CFO, that the senior leadership team are engaged in this and taking it seriously, because it does kind of fall down the organisation through that. The importance of leadership and sustainability, the two go hand in hand. I'm only seeing it more and more. And the leaders within organisations, small or large, who are, really, I suppose, engaging with sustainability, making it part of their strategy, and using it as an opportunity to make their business better, are making their business better. And that requires vision, and it requires dedication and determination, but if you know, from a smaller company perspective, if somebody at the top is saying, this is our kind of North Star, we're really going to dig into this, that makes a huge difference. Beyond that, when you can't have a dedicated director of sustainability, or you can't have, you know, a large consultancy come in to provide you with all of the support you need, building capability within the organization is absolutely important. So, you know, and that can be anybody. Often you get people putting their hand up around kind of sustainability, saying, I'm interested in this, I'd like to explore it a bit more. This is something that, you know, I see opportunity in as well from a career perspective. And it's to jump on those people and say, okay, come on the journey with me. Let's figure out how we can increase your knowledge and your understanding of this, and how that will ultimately benefit the company. So in Enterprise Ireland, over the last year, we've developed a huge number of capability development supports to meet that requirement specifically, like with the understanding that SMEs are time poor, resource poor. They need these kind of short, sharp programs to help them get on track. So we have a Kickstarter workshop. We run this every second week. It's a 3-hour workshop, and it's very much directed at small companies, in the sense that if on Thursday evening, it runs every Friday morning, you think, I actually can't log into that in the morning. It's okay. There's the same thing as running 2 weeks later. We have brought about 300 companies through that now, Enterprise Ireland client companies. It's really interactive. There's, you know, you walk away at the end of it as well with a sustainability action plan for your business. So it's to try as be as kind of, engaging and interactive, and go beyond kind of that webinar piece, I suppose, with that workshop. We're also partnering with SkillNet and we've done, or over the last year, we've done a sustainability leaders program with SkillNet. We've rolled that out. We've had over 100 companies come through that. There's been 5 cohorts. That's a 12-week program. The real value in that program is at the end of the 12 weeks, a small company walks away with a sustainability charter for their business that they have to present their senior leadership team. And it's really a plan around sustainability for them for the next year. And what's important about, you know, these types of programs and the development of a sustainability plan is Enterprise Ireland's going to start asking for this information from our client companies. That's a mammoth change for us as an organisation, to put sustainability on equal par as, you know, jobs, as employment, and as growth for organisations. That's a big shift. So we're trying as much as possible to support our companies to start to begin their sustainability journeys and to develop that capability within their organisation. And then there's a huge range of supports through our Climate Action Fund, or our Climate Planning Fund for Business, that allows companies to get funding to bring a consultant in to help them with specific aspects of their sustainability journey, I suppose. But yeah, that capability development piece within your organisation is really important. So from a leadership perspective, when you're in an SME, if somebody puts up their hand and says, do you know what, I think this might be something that I'd like to get involved with, it's to jump on that and to kind of point them in the right direction and maximise that level of engagement and interest and passion in a lot of cases that a lot of people have around this area.
Okay, so if I maybe summarise then some of the kind of key messages I'm hearing about the good aspects of CSRD. So I'm hearing there's a level of certainty from a regulatory point of view, Michael. I'm hearing that it's really important from smaller companies in terms of securing their customers, winning their customers. And I'm hearing ultimately in terms of large companies, not only is it the right thing to do, it's competitively important, and it is ultimately a key part of your business in terms of how you're growing going forward. So that's kind of the good part of it, okay? So if we maybe talk about the practical challenges now, okay, and whether we use the word bad or the hard part of it, because this is not trivial, right? And this is very data-driven. You know, there's a level of complexity and regulations. And Yvonne, I know you're in the middle of leading kind of major program across DCC at the moment. You know, what do you see the kind of the actual challenges of putting together a wider sustainability plan? You know, encompassing CSRD specifically, but all the other things. What do you see the practical challenges that you have to focus on?
Yeah, and I suppose for us, you know, we were mature in some areas like the emissions, which is great because I know that's a challenge for a lot of companies. So the emissions and health and safety are kind of two big focus areas for us. we do have really good third-party management of suppliers, but I would say this whole supplier area is probably the biggest challenge or newer area for us. So while we would, have quite robust processes in place across the different companies, we didn't have a group procurement. We don't have group procurement. So even getting a view on the supplier ecosystem is a real challenge. And, third-party management typically focused on your tier one suppliers, whereas this requires, a view up the value chain and being able to kind of identify where the risks are from a human rights and environmental impacts perspective. So that's probably one area, I would say, kind of getting that visibility of that ecosystem, understanding where the risk hotspots are, and then having a clear framework for how to kind of where to focus in with those suppliers, how to engage them, and then what areas you're trying to drive continuous improvement on. Because that's really in preparation for CSDDD as well. Like CSRD is about disclosing what you're doing with suppliers, but CSDDD, which is very close on the heels, is about showing the action, the due diligence that's been done, how are you understanding the risk, how are you taking action, how are you remediating. So we're kind of setting ourselves up for that in this work as well. So the supplier piece is probably the biggest challenge. The data is challenging in spots, right? And, for some we've group systems, for others we're having to use tactical approaches to gather the data, Excel, and we'll review that as we go along, and we'll see how we can automate it. But we're not diving into a big, massive ESG reporting system, because we just don't think there's necessarily a golden nugget out there. And also, we want to kind of be clear and firm up the way we're producing the info. But I would say the probably the time-consuming piece relating to the data, as much as getting the data, is documenting the processes and the controls and checks that are in place. We're really putting a lot of time into that, so we're kind of, we'll say, audit ready. And also that we're obviously giving very clear guidance to our businesses around what they need to do, what audit is going to be asking them, have they done, and have evidence to show that they've done these checks. But having this kind of internal control framework document to give to the audit committee to say, all right, we're telling you this is how it works, in terms of to give you that assurance that this data is produced in a robust way with these checks and controls on it. So I'd say don't underestimate the time it takes to do that.
And do you see that the EU taxonomy, is that helpful here in terms of kind of putting a shape on data that you have to capture?
I think the EU taxonomy is it's very prescriptive, and I think it is good in that it really does pull back the covers around what companies are doing in terms of, investing in green activity, right? So it's categorizing your activities into whether they're supporting environmentally sustainable objectives. So it's good that it's really prescriptive, because again, you couldn't compare what really companies were doing. I would say it's flawed a bit in that it very much focuses on manufacturing companies or generation of electricity. We do distribution of a lot of products. A lot of that doesn't fall into scope even to be eligible. Where it is eligible, I think it is going to drive the right activity, right? While it's painful to go down through all the activities and say which ones are relevant from an eligibility perspective, and then to do the alignment. So if I take, for example, we install solar panels, right? And so that's eligible activity. But to say it's aligned, you have to make sure it meets the minimum safeguards, so no human rights issues in the supply chain, or does no significant harm to the environment. Now, half of the polysilicon for solar panels comes from China, which is known human rights abuses. So for us to be able to give that assurance, you can't. Now, for one of our companies, PVO, supplies solar panels to our businesses and other businesses. They have done a lot of brilliant work in tracing back up through the value chain. So actually going through the bills of materials for all the suppliers, checking to say, all right, if you say that's your invoice, show me where it's paid. It's actually getting the provenance of exactly all the way back, not just taking it as, that's my documentation. It's actually the proof behind that, and getting on-site audits by solar inspection companies where there's higher risk suppliers. But even those solar inspection companies will say you can't get past the wafer production, like Ingo and Quartz. So until we can do that, we can't say we're aligned. But my point is, it is driving us to actually really interrogate our value chains and actually say, well, can we continue to do that? This isn't good. Like, we need to look at sourcing different materials through different suppliers in different countries. And I think that's really positive because it is weeding out those challenges with human rights and potential environmental issues.
Okay, right, that's interesting. But maybe as just a kind of a challenge on that, and an awful lot of what you talk about there is very much focused on the or side of it, and Michael, is there any risk here that we are tranquilizing ourselves by focusing on just reporting the numbers and not really, building the skills and capability to drive through the actions to actually achieve the outcome, which is sustainable and sustainable practices?
Well, I suppose what is reported gets done. Yvonne has just outlined a practical impact of what this has meant. And I think that is the key side of this. So, look, you mentioned I was CEO of IASA, the Irish Auditing and Accounting Supervisory Authority. And when you look at this is regulation. This is enforceable. My old colleagues in IASA, you'll all be delighted to know, have been designated as the enforcer of the reporting side of this. And it's going to fit into the same format as the letters some of you are getting about accounting standards. You will now be getting letters, including you, Yvonne, in DCC. Well, maybe, not of course, but potentially.
You know who to address it to anyway.
Well, no, I am not working there anymore, but it's the same type of thing. It is enforcing these ESRS standards, and we do have a regulator in place, and coincidentally, IASA issued what's known as the observations document, which is a document I put together many years ago, and for the first time it has a segment on sustainability and these standards and what they intend to do. So these are enforceable regulations, whether we like it or not. So this isn't going away. This is, this is legislation. The legislation has been enacted here already, and these things are going to be enforced. But they are going to drive change. It's companies reporting, as you know, on what they're doing in these areas, how they're meeting these requirements, and if there are holes, they will fix them, which will drive positive change. Perhaps reluctantly with some companies along the way, but it has to happen. So that is a positive. It is, we're in a room of effectively accountants here. We all know that some of the disclosures around financial instruments might be a pain in the backside, quite frankly, but this is real practical stuff. This is about how are you dealing with sustainability issues, how are you dealing with social issues, modern slavery, all of this sort of stuff is included, whistleblowing, etc. So it's forcing companies. And I said that's a negative, actually. They're doing it anyway. I'm sure everyone's positively, but it is forcing companies to report on this, which will lead to positive change.
Okay, so that's interesting in terms of kind of the what gets measured point. I think I'd agree with you on that.
And maybe, Lawrence, just add, I do think, when I hear people saying, it's taking up so much time and not allowing to focus on sustainability, I don't believe that. Even for companies like AIB and DCC are well on the journey, it's still requiring us to do more. And obviously, there's a lot of companies that weren't reporting to that depth and extent, and it's kind of the stick rather than the carrot. But the point of it is, it's not just what you're doing within your own four walls. It is driving that ecosystem, that value chain, that all boats rise. You influence, they influence. Without regulation, you wouldn't have that. And this data piece, while it's painful, it's like a baselining. It's a baselining that has to be put in place to really be able to compare and assess are people making progress. And that's what we all need. The Minister said it well this morning, it is an urgent climate crisis amongst, never mind the social impact side. So, yeah, sorry, just to add to that.
Okay, no, I think that's a good perspective as well to add to it. But Joanne, from smaller companies, and again, Minister spoke about trickle down. You spoke about wider supply chain. you spoke about kind of there's a carrot and stick element here, but it feels that this is more a deluge in terms of a trickle down. I mean, what do you see as the level of awareness across the companies outside the likes of DCC in terms of what they need to do? And I know you're doing a lot in terms of providing support, but do you really think that people understand what this means and the level of urgency?
I mean, the quick answer is no. Like our program in Enterprise Ireland, the team that I'm on, like it was kind of initiated 2 years ago, and subsequently has grown and grown and grown. And so much of it, and so much of the programs that we're running and the capability development supports are on the back of information that we gathered from our annual business review survey that goes out to all of Enterprise Ireland client companies that came back and said, two-thirds of our companies don't have a sustainability plan. They don't know what you're talking about. They're saying, well, absolutely not, this is nothing to do with my business. And on the back of that, there was a huge push to try and engage Enterprise Ireland clients, particularly the SME sector, to really start and to really try and get on the road around sustainability. Things like the Kickstarter I mentioned, things like the webinars that we have on our website as well. I get asked all the time, do you have case studies? Is there case studies? I now say webinars are the new case studies. This is the future, guys. Because just like Yvonne said, we have about 20 case study or 20 webinars on our website that we ran last year, recordings. And in each of those webinars, there's 2 or 3 companies talking about how they use the supports to start out on their sustainability journey, to achieve B Corp certification, to figure out what biodiversity means to their organisation. So that's kind of the bank of case studies, I suppose. But all of this activity is on the back of like appreciating in a very black and white way that actually Irish companies are not at the races when it comes to this. And, I agree completely, Yvonne, with what you said around the wider ecosystem impact that the CSRD has and the positivity that the CSRD kind of imbues, I suppose, because it starts to create, it starts to kind of set the tone around sustainability, and it's another piece to kind of point to say you need to be doing this. This is important. It's the stick. There's also the carrot piece as well, but there's wider benefits to the CSRD in the sense that it's kind of setting the trend, I suppose. And then that supports us in our engagement with smaller companies, telling them that if they don't engage around sustainability, they don't start a sustainability plan. Number one, their interaction with Enterprise Ireland is going to lessen and lessen because this is such an important aspect or important focus for Enterprise Ireland. They're going to lose business. They're going to be left behind, really. So I think it's building, but no, the sense of urgency and the sense of importance for smaller companies around sustainability isn't quite where I suppose we'd like it. But it's getting there. We're getting there. And that's where larger companies like DCC come in. There's also a piece around engaging with your supply chain, engaging with the smaller companies, saying to them, this is really important. You have to start kind of figuring this out and helping them. That's another element to it, I suppose, as well.
Okay, so quite sobering in terms of listening to maybe the level of awareness. So if I maybe summarise kind of what I'm hearing maybe about the bad part of it. So it really sounds actually, it's not so much, shouldn't be viewed as being bad, should be viewed as being challenging, right? It should be viewed as having a level of opportunity around it. But there's also a wake-up call dimension to it that if you don't get with the programme, you're going to get left behind. Whether it's from support from Enterprise Ireland or filtering out suppliers that can't help you achieve where you need to get to. And then obviously from the enforcement side of it. Okay. So if we maybe move on to the final theme that we have for this morning, which is the promising aspects, right? And we've talked about supply chains several times, and you used the phrase ecosystem a little bit earlier, Yvonne, and that's an area that we in Sia Partners do quite a bit with some of our clients in other areas, right? But they do touch on sustainability. So I'm kind of interested in what do you see the concept of ecosystems means in practice in terms of bringing together potentially peers, maybe in some areas might be competitors. What do you see that is in practice, and what opportunities do you see that has?
Yeah, like I mentioned about the energy management services kind of arm that we're really trying to, grow. And like that's where a lot of our capital spend is going, and we're kind of building that ecosystem of partners. So it's not like it's a lot of different companies that provide different products. We're trying to bring them together into an ecosystem. So we've launched like a WeWise brand in France to kind of, it's an umbrella to bring them together. And like our businesses in the UK, so we've people might know the brands, but in Ireland it's Flow Gas and Certa, and we've Certas in the UK. So they're coming together to kind of offer a portfolio of solutions to customers. But also I mentioned about HVO, like the supply of HVO is going to be a challenge as more and more consumers start to use it. We have it on the pumps actually in Liffey Valley in a number of different garages. So you can actually drop it into your own car instead of diesel, just FYI, 90% less emissions. But so the commercial customers are starting to use that more and more. So we have to make sure we have the supply guaranteed. So we're working with partners to kind of, guarantee and kind of have that close relationship to offtake that when they produce it. And similarly, we've done a bio CNG refueling with Gas Networks Ireland. So we're looking at where can we kind of work together to kind of take out the blockages and to kind of make that more seamless for customers. And that's just kind of a constant evolution.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. And in terms of wider sustainability and infrastructure, so whether it's building the biofuels and to bring that together, for Enterprise Ireland clients, what supports do you see? And I know you mentioned support in terms of training and awareness, but are there other supports available in terms of whether it's incentives or grants for to help build the type of infrastructure that's needed to help smaller companies reach that type of level of capability?
Yeah, I suppose we have a huge range of sustainability supports now. They fall under the Climate Planning Fund for Business. So we have a Climate Action Voucher, which is a €2,000 support that allows a company to engage with the consultant for about 2 days to really kick them off on their sustainability journey. That increases to a Green Start, which is about €5,000. It increases to a Green Plus, which is up to €50,000 support. That's for building capability within your organisation through training, through different programs that you can run. But it's also for a more in-depth engagement with a consultant with particular expertise, perhaps to help achieve a certain certification like an ISO standard, an EcoVadis certification. And then we also have Strategic Consultancy Grant, which is for larger organisations, larger companies who really want to dig into what they can do around the emissions reduction piece and scope out much larger projects. Beyond that, we also have a capital grant that's available for energy and environmental projects. And then beyond that, again, we have environmental aid, which is really significant capital funding that's available to companies to help them decarbonise their operations. The Minister mentioned the Diageo project, that was a €100 million investment to totally transform the St James's Gate manufacturing facility. And what Diageo are doing there is something that I think in the future, and what Enterprise Ireland is supporting through that project around kind of bringing innovative solutions to the facility, decarbonising the facility completely. It's something that companies, we feel confident that companies from overseas will start to come to visit St James's Gate as almost like a pinnacle or a pilot of what can be done and the benefits of doing this. That's a huge thing for Ireland as a company, as a country to have. So it's a standout project. So there's significant capital funding available to support companies on their sustainability and decarbonisation journey specifically. Enterprise Ireland, like the Minister said, is tasked with meeting that 35% reduction when it comes to the enterprise emissions sector in Ireland. And what we figured out, it's quick to do, That 35% emissions piece, it sits with about 20 of our clients. It sits with about 20 of the largest companies in Ireland. So it's direct engagement with those to really incentivise the cement sector, the food and drink sector, to get out ahead of this and to do as much as possible to support them in their ambitions. But then, of course, you have to look, that's a small number of clients. There's also the kind of engaging with the SME sector around sustainability and what it means for them. And I always say, sustainability, it often kind of gets, like we call our fund the Green Transition Fund, and green is we're going beyond green now. The full scope of sustainability is much broader than just the environment and the energy and the waste piece. Going back to like the benefits of the CSRD, again, it provides that full scope, that understanding of kind of what a company has to do to really be sustainable. So yeah, there's a lot of funding supports there. And I would also say, it's not just about Enterprise Ireland's supports. It's going back to your that word, ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of supports. We now have I get the name wrong all the time. It's the National Enterprise Hub. I think it's the National Enterprise Hub. It's a website from the Department of Enterprise and Trade. And I nearly point people towards that before I point them to our website anymore, because that will give you the full ecosystem of supports from SCAI, from Uisce Éireann, from Enterprise Ireland, that your company might be able to avail of. There's stuff on there that I don't know about. So that's really the kind of the one-stop shop now for supports is the National Enterprise Hub, to see that ecosystem of funding that's there for companies and make the most of it, use it. That's what it's there for. Engage with the local enterprise office, engage with Enterprise Ireland. We have a directory of consultants on our website that we use the supports through us. There's 100 consultants there. They all are so familiar with the Enterprise Ireland supports. It's almost like a marketing opportunity for them to go into an organisation, go into a small company and say, we know how Enterprise Ireland's climate planning fund for business works. We can help you engage with them, and we can help you access the funding that's available.
Okay, that's very interesting. I wasn't aware that that hub, I'm aware of its existence, hadn't realised was providing quite as much in terms of resources. Michael, maybe before we go to our audience this morning, so we spoke about kind of what's promising for companies. If you maybe look at the community of people that you know, what do you see as promising for individuals here in terms of what it means for their own career, future development, future opportunities it might mean for them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, as I said, this is a new, in Compliance Institute, we've about 6-7 designations at this stage. It's hard to keep up with them all. There was a time up to, I'd say, 10-15 years ago that you had a main compliance designation, and the compliance function was doing everything. It was doing AML, anti-money laundering, it was doing data protection, etc. They're all separate sub-industries and careers now, as you know, financial crime and data protection. This is another one. Yvonne is a good example of it. So you are going to have people that can forge a career in this area only, and a career in the reporting area specifically. But broader than that, there is a lot of funding. Joanna spoke about the grants that are available for various people. But there's also, I'm on the Sustainable Finance Skill Net, there's a huge amount of funding for training and for upskilling, and there's a lot of money, and there's been more, 63 million SkillNet is getting as announced in the budget, so they have a lot more money to give out on this area. So there's no excuse and there's no shortage of courses and programs. It's variable. I mean, if we can finish maybe on a more negative note, but it swings around. Like, we saw a huge uptake 2 years ago in demand for these education programs. As I said, we've about 100 people coming through. It's less so now. SkillNet are struggling to give out money, imagine that, in some of these things. But equally, our short programme, we have a shorter programme as well. We deferred it, and now it has another 50 people on it. So these things come in cycles. But there's a lot of money out there, a lot of programmes, a lot of courses across industries, and I would encourage everyone to avail of it, because while they mightn't be free, you can get up to 90% funding for them.
can I say as well, just on that career piece, I think Minister Cleary, mentioned the kind of dual focus around digitisation and around sustainability, and Enterprise Ireland's going to launch our new strategy at the end of this year, and those two areas are getting such a huge prominence, and understandably so. And I suppose they're two areas from a career perspective that if you're thinking about what maybe your next move is to engage in one of those two areas. We're always going up against the digitisation team. I always say, digitisation requires you to kind of stick your head in your phone. I don't know if anyone here is like me. I'm trying to get away from my phone. I don't want to see it anymore. I've enough phone time. Sustainability requires you to open up, to go outside, to engage with your community. There's so many kind of rewarding aspects to working in this area and to thinking about it as a real career opportunity, because sustainability professionals are under demand. Sustainability requires you to kind of go and think about the environment that you're living in, to think about kind of your impact potentially globally. It's such an open, great area to work in. It really and truly is. And I suppose, if there's an opportunity, if you think, I could maybe get into this a little bit more, the sky's the limit now. I've been working in sustainability for 15 years, and never has there been such demand, such focus, such momentum behind it. So if you're thinking about it, jump into one of the programs that's available and engage and start doing what you can, because climate change is a global emergency that we all have to kind of think about and start doing what we can to try and, I suppose, avoid disaster as much as possible. So jump into what's there and go outside, stand under a tree. There's nothing better.
So I think that's a great call for action, Joanne. Thank you.